Good morning and welcome to the news. Today we will be discussing racism around the world. While you might think you know everything that there is to know about racism and stereotypical races around the world, what you will soon find out may baffle you. There are many different aspects of racism that the media does not expose and are a major concern to people around the world today. Today we uncover these truths and ask 3 racism experts in Europe, East Asia, and North America about their thoughts on racism. We begin with North America.
Hello, Mr. Joby.
Pleasure having you here today.
But you know what's not a pleasure? The unfair treatment of the millions of illegal Hispanic immigrants and the generalizations of their culture. Hispanics make up 49% of the illegal immigrant population. These immigrants make up 8.1 million or 5.1% of America's labor force. George Barjas, a Harvard economist, says that these immigrants are taking the low-skilled jobs that Americans would normally do. Most do not even have high school diplomas, and about 800,000 are either maids, housekeepers, or cooks. The true origin of these issues is the xenophobia and unwillingness of Americans to show their culture. Although, ironically, America is dubbed a cultural melting pot.
And how do you feel about the presidential candidate, Donald Trump?
Donald John Trump. You know, he's quite atrocious. He keeps a stereotype of immigrants as rapists and murderers, and all he wants to do is build a wall separating the United States from Mexico. Yes, we have the freedom of speech, but this is evidence that he abuses his freedom, saying whatever he wants and completely disregarding racism as a whole. He literally ignores the fact that immigrants are humans just like himself. It's ridiculous. You know, Donald Trump was once a man respected by many people due to his success, but now there may be more people who disrespect him due to his racist comments.
I agree. And what do you think we should do to improve these issues?
To be honest, I really can't give you a solution right now. Trump is saying all these racist comments as a presidential candidate, so who knows what he'll say when he gets even more power as president. It all goes down from here. However, my hope is placed in Clinton, because she stated that she will continue on the plans Obama had on immigration. We all know Obama's time is up, so he won't get to act on these plans, but he's counting on Hillary to continue his legacy.
Thank you for your time once again, Isaac. Now here to expand on these issues is Tess Stefan, our correspondent specializing in the discrimination of Muslims by Europeans.
Good morning, Tom.
What do you think is the root of the racism in your region?
In Europe, the region is typically known for advanced technology and culture. This stereotype of the region was present all the way back in prehistoric times and has resulted in Europeans attempting to conquer the world and assuming the people they conquer are inferior. Such is the case with the Middle East. Europeans have labeled the people from or currently living in the Middle East as savages for the differences in their cultures, and this generalization has spread around the world, which has increased discrimination and racism.
How has this resulted in the issues currently present today?
Currently, we have the migrant crisis as a result of the internal wars in Syria and other countries in the Middle East. And where there is war, there are refugees. These refugees are looking for a place to live, and many have applied for asylum in Europe. Those numbers are rising, but estimates put them around 2 million to date. However, considering these aforementioned stereotypes that are negatively affecting Middle Eastern people exist, the results have been disastrous. Germany has constant protestations and riots, and the New Year's attack in Cologne is a prime example of this. France is blaming their increase in terrorism on the migrants, and basically the European Union is sending their refugees to Turkey and Lebanon, who are hosting the majority of refugees in the region already. All of this is due to the tense relations between the people of Middle East and Europe.
Quite intriguing. And how could we solve these matters of the European migrant crisis today?
To start, the European Union is introducing quotas for European countries to fill with refugees. These quotas will even out the spread of refugees and people of the Middle East. However, in my opinion, countries should be enforcing the joining of these cultures as opposed to forcing Middle Eastern people to assimilate. In addition, there should be positive role models set to encourage both refugees and citizens of Europe to be supportive of each other. Thank you for your time, Tom.
That's a fascinating perspective. It's truly horrifying what people have done. Now we move on to our next guest, Sean Lau, who will be discussing today the racial stereotypes in Asia.
Hello, Tom.
So how did this problem start in East Asia anyways?
Today I would like to start off at the root of the problem, which are the origins. The origins of the stereotyping within this region begin with two problems. First of all, if one thinks about it, a large percentage of this region is secluded from modern ideas that circulate around the world. This large percentage of East Asia still maintains the small village mentalities and the tight-knit community ideology. Secondly, the strong culture of this region maintains with it an old stigma around Africans. Dating back to the Qing periods, East Asians had a primitive understanding of what race and color were, just like the Europeans. This primitive thinking is what led to the superiority of race, and by this I mean that East Asians thought that they were the superior race. The idea of superiority within the color of skin is what created the stigma around Africans.
Are there any examples of the superior race ideology in East Asian literature?
Well, a key example is an old Chinese fable about the divine potter and the creation of human beings. The story starts with a divine potter and a bunch of clay figures, humans. In order to be complete, the clay figures had to be fired in a kiln. The first batch of humans the divine potter made, he placed in the oven and forgot to take them out at the right time. These humans were burnt and undesirable, so the divine potter threw them all the way to Africa. The second batch of humans the divine potter made, he placed them in the oven and took them out too early. These humans were undercooked, and he threw this batch to Europe. The last batch of humans the divine potter made, he placed in the oven and took them out at just the right time. These humans he placed right next to him in East Asia. From this fable, one can see the primitive understanding of race, and how self-prejudice is embedded throughout the story and much of Asian culture.
So how do these racist origins impact African Americans in Asia today?
This stigma is partly the reason that diversity is hard to come by in Asia. In one of the largest cities in China, Guangzhou, there are about 200,000 Africans. This accounts for a puny 2% of the city's population. To add on, the 2% of the Africans within the city are concentrated in one particular section of the city called Chocolate City. Even in a highly globalized city, prejudice can be seen next to modern ideologies. For insight to the issue, we can look to the words of Professor Barry Saltman, a professor of social sciences at the Hong Kong Science and Technology University. Professor Saltman states that even in those cities where there is now a concentration of black people, still most Chinese have little to no contact with them. He further comments that Africa is portrayed as a horror house filled with crime, disease, and war. The problem one can see from this is simply that East Asians are uneducated about the race and a lack of exposure.
You say that the problem is a lack of education about race and exposure. Is there any way we could solve this?
Yes, in fact, the problem is already gradually resolving itself. Due to the presidential term of Barack Obama and the large number of African American athletes in the Chinese Basketball League, exposure of Africans to East Asians has increased. In short, the one way to solve this problem is simply just for races to interact. Interaction is the only way to break down the racial barrier.
Thank you for the input, Mr. Lau. Now that you've seen an in-depth look at the issues of stereotyping, hopefully you are now aware of the issues and can be part of the solution. And that's all we have for now, folks. Have a wonderful day. So how do these racist origins impact African Americans?